Right, so I think we have a serious problem in society, an epidemic actually, and it's an epidemic of horny men and slutty women. That's my opinion. In this video, I'll talk about this, what I mean by it, any possible solutions I have, why this takes place, and yeah, just giving my take on this. Now, even though I'll be judging in this video, it's not complete judgment. Because if I'm being honest, I'm one of these horny men. And so, yeah, I'm not looking from a place of judgment and just judging people. However, I will be judging in some ways, also holding people accountable, including myself. Now, I will start by talking about why there's horny men. And I'm not a woman, but why I also believe there's slutty women. So let's start with the men. Now, every man has a natural desire, sexual desire. You know, majority of men are attracted to women. We have that desire. This is something that is innate within every man. However, I do believe as a society, this is enhanced more than ever. And it's through a multitude of reasons. I think with sex no longer being sacred as it used to be, due to the invention of birth control, contraceptions, condoms, you're able to experiment in ways that, you couldn't before, with the cost of, a woman getting pregnant and, diseases, STDs. Also with pornography, a lot of men watch porn, and this affects how they view sex. It affects them mentally, and it also makes them crave it even more. So yeah, there's that. There's the sex no longer being sacred, the promotion of, things like porn, just how technology in general, social media, the things that you're able to view. I don't think definitely a man 100 years ago would not have seen the amount of nudity online that a man today can see. And I think this can affect you mentally. And with a lack of sometimes purpose, meaning in your life, you can distract yourself with pleasure, whether online or in real life. And I think that takes place and helps contribute to, so many horny men. A lack of meaning as well. So there's the technology side of it. There's the fact that it's not seen as sacred, the promotion of it, and also as a distraction, whether online or in real life. There's literally a whole industry that has horny men and slutty women, a whole sex industry, a whole marketplace, whether online or in real life. Listen, don't ask me how I know or that, but this takes place. Okay? I think this is an issue. So that's why it takes place for men. And with women, I'm not a woman, but what I would assume is, the same thing. The invention of women also have their own desire, sexual desire. I believe on average, men's desire is more than women, but they also have their desire. With the contraception as well, for women for the first time in history, a woman could experiment sexually where they couldn't have, let's say, hundreds of years ago because of the risk of falling pregnant. So they also have this desire, the invention of contraception, the promotion of sex. Sex gives women attention, which a lot of women like. They can gain financially through it, so they can sell themselves sexually. So that's what I would assume why there's slutty, promiscuous women out there, because they enjoy sex, they have the desire to do it. They can protect themselves through contraception and the promotion of it, and they can also benefit from it attention wise and financially. I think that's why there's an epidemic of slutty women. So I've given why I think there's horny men and why there's slutty women. As a combination, I think this is destructive. This is chaotic. If you're thinking long term, obviously short term, if you think short term, great. From a worldly sense, we can experience a lot of pleasure, from a short-term basis, there's that. But long-term wise, I think the ultimate goal and success between a man and a woman would be a long-term meaningful relationship, which would result in a family, children, that. But with using people on a short-term basis, I think that can affect you mentally as a person. I think that can always leave you never satisfied, always craving more, looking for what's next. It can be a distraction rather than focusing on something more meaningful. And it can also make you more of like cold and distant person because of, how many different partners or times you just consumed on the internet, sex, nudity and stuff like that. It always leaves you craving more. It leaves you unsatisfied. And there's actually data that backs this up, that particularly for a man and a woman, but particularly for a woman, the more sexual partners she has, the more likely she is to get divorced. There's data that backs this up. And also with men, their lust and their desires, I'm sure that's contributed to divorces in the past as well. So that's why I believe that this is a chaotic combination, because for both men and women, it contributes to divorce. When I believe the main goal should be a long-term meaningful relationship, which should result in a marriage, which should be a lifelong commitment. But because of, giving up to our sexual desires, that contributes to the breakdown. And I think this is a reason why there's a conflict between men and women in society that's going on. Obviously, some people are still in long-term meaningful relationships and are, I'm not saying it's all, there's all a division. However, there is a conflict that takes place between men and women that can't be ignored. And I believe the epidemic of horny men and slutty women is a reason why there's this conflict. I saw this tweet, that said something along the lines of what the sexual revolution did, contraception did, and the whole sexual revolution is that it made almost like both genders sort of disgusted with one another, in a way that women can see men's predatory desires, lustful desires, which disgust them in a way, and men can also see women, promiscuous women, sluts, and be disgusted by that. It's almost like it's made us, because because contraception has made people experiment sex more, it's also made people, both genders, know more about each other because of different experiences and have a level of disgust and contempt for one another, whilst also being attracted. There's this weird, dichotomy that, there's that whole Madonna whore complex between men, that men like slutty women, but at the same time are disgusted by them. So yeah, the whole, biologically you're attracted to the opposite gender, but you're also disgusted by, from a woman's point of view, the predatory nature of them, and from a man's point of view, the promiscuous nature. So there's that. So yeah, promiscuity in general is just not, I think there's more negatives that comes with that than positives. The Bible, I was raised a Christian, and the Bible says is against sex before marriage. It's against fornication. I can see why it recommends this, because I remember when I was reading the Bible, it said something along the lines of, this is the only sin that you do with your body, this is why God is really against that, because you're doing it with your body and you should see your body as a temple. And I can now see why it recommends this, because with just giving free access to this, I think there's been destructive results. But obviously I'm not, bigger than the program. Like I said, I contribute to this. I'm just saying why I see why the Bible recommends saving yourself for marriage. I don't see how you can ever we can even go back in a lot of ways, even though I do think one of the solutions is people turning more to Christianity, taking their faith very seriously. I believe it makes them better people. But then at the same time, if you have experimented this, it's very difficult to go back and completely turn around. So even though I'm contradicting myself, I do think I don't want to make a full negative video and say there's nothing we can do, but sometimes I do feel that way, that maybe we've gone too far, that it is what it is. But then that wouldn't be Christian, and Christianity is always preaches about optimism and, being positive. But then in some ways, when I say we've gone too far, maybe that's a good thing. That can it really get any worse than what it is now with the sexual degeneracy that goes on? I think online has been a major contributor to that. There's been sex industries that have made loads of money. The product is the woman most of the time, and it's the men that are paying. This is one of the issues of capitalism, where money is the focus. But is there a better economic system than capitalism? I don't know. But this is one of the flaws of capitalism, where money is very, very important, that you can literally create an industry of this. So yeah, those are reasons why I think this is a serious problem in society. And it's destructive because, people, I would hope, want to settle down one day with a partner, whether you're male or female, and, you want that to work. You don't want to just get into a marriage to just get divorced. You want that to work, but with some of the decisions that you've made, that could affect you when you're in the marriage, because you're unsatisfied. You always know that there's more. You crave more. You can be weak to your whatever lustful desires you have. And this is then trickles down to whether you eventually have kids, and, breakdown in relationships result to single parent households, and that then trickles down, and then you're raising kids that, become lustful degenerates themselves. And then it just goes on and on and on. I think this is a major issue. Sometimes doing worldly things makes you see why the Bible recommends things. This is easier said than done, you know. I, I like everyone else has their desires. I'm not here to say I live this chaste, I'm no sexually disciplined guy, because I'm really not. And I'm just looking down and judging people. But then at the same time, I think this is something that is a serious problem in society, and it's not a good combination to have horny men and promiscuous women going forward. I don't think that's a good combination. But then I'm not quite sure what solution there is other than Christianity, really, because of the selfless nature you need to have in Christianity, and also you knowing that all this promiscuity is affecting you mentally. You can also look at it from a psychological perspective, that you are using another person as a means to an end. Maybe people can look at it from that lens if they don't want to follow religion. Maybe I guess the psychological and how it's affecting you mentally. Maybe that's another solution. Using somebody as a means to an end. You're sacrificing the short term for the long term, because all the data shows that the more promiscuous you are, the more likely marriage will end in divorce. So whether through Christianity, whether through from a psychological basis, or delayed gratification, I guess, it's not sacrificing the short term for long term. But then I also do understand why this happens. As I said, there's desire that we have. Sex is promoted a lot. It's no longer sacred. So yeah, there's that part. But overall, I don't think this is a good combination. And I think this is a serious issue. I think this is why there's a lot of conflict between men and women. I think this is why a lot of people's mental health isn't the best, due to all of this sexual degeneracy. But that's just my opinion. I've been a bit incoherent, I guess. But it's just a take that I have, an opinion. The epidemic of horny men and slutty women is a chaotic combination.